Hello, 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 and welcome back to the Small Biz Better Summit. It has been such an amazing day. So many great speakers. We got so many great speakers ahead as well. And this session is no exception because we have Mr. Rohit, the non-obvious creator himself. How are you doing, sir?
Very, very good. It's good to talk to you. I'm looking forward to it.
I love it. I love it. We are so happy to have you here. Rohit comes with, well, get this. He's taking time out of his busy day, out of his busy schedule, because he's actually on tour right now as we speak for his best selling book, his Wall Street Journal #1 best selling book, Non Obvious Megatrends. And we are just so happy to have you here. So it is such an honor to have you here, man. So thank you so much for joining us. This is
Yeah, you're
amazing.
welcome. The tour makes it sound like I'm heading out with Beyonce, so I like that. That's pretty good, man.
Cross your fingers. That's on my wish list right now. Heading out with Beyonce and Jay
Yep.
Z. Yes, I love it. I love it. So here at the Small Biz Better Summit, you know that we are giving you the tips, the tools, the tactics in order to do better in your small business. We believe strongly that small business is something you have to do actively. It's not something you can do passively and expect to get results. So small biz better. We're looking to make small biz not just a noun, but small biz a verb, small biz better, which is why we have the Small Biz Better Summit. And today, Rohit's going to talk to us about some non-obvious trends in the industry that can help you build your small business. He's going to mention a few of his books that are also bestsellers, so you're really in for a treat as well. Rohit, tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started. For anybody who's not familiar with Rohit, you want to be familiar with this man.
Yeah, I come from the world of marketing. I spent more than 10 years working in big ad agencies, running campaigns, and really I consider myself a storyteller, and I think that's what great marketing is.
Yeah.
And so I teach storytelling at Georgetown University as a occasional professor here in DC where I live. Not full time. I couldn't never do that. It's a lot of work, but yeah, I teach a course, and I've written a couple of books on just bringing more personality to business, being more human, and really as a small business, like using the advantage that we have. And I'm a small business owner too, right? And the advantage we have is that we can be more human than our bigger competitors. And so how do we use that? How do we tell better stories as marketers, and how do we just do the things that we want marketing to do, right? Drive our business, grow our business, get more customers, get our customers to rave about us. I mean, all those things.
I love that. I love that. And you mentioned several good things there I want to tap in on. First of all, he's being very modest, everyone. He says he's written a couple of books. He's written over nearly a dozen best-selling books. The Mega Trend series, the Non-Obvious Trend series, is an entire series dating back to, I believe, 2011.
Yep.
He's being very modest, which I mean, just man, you are just awesome, awesome, and amazing. And not to mention his other book that he also has out, Small Business Marketing Trends as well. Here at the marketing agency, we love collaborating with other top level marketers like Rohit. So you guys are really in for a treat today. And one thing I want to start with that you just mentioned is storytelling. I just did a seminar yesterday and we were talking about the power of storytelling and how it's so important for small businesses to really get back to. I know it's tempting with all the social media and things, and we work with social media and technology all the time, but people are often shocked when I say, hey, it's really about storytelling. It's really about connecting at that heart level. What are some of your thoughts and some of your experiences on storytelling, and why do you promote it so much as well?
Yeah, I think that, a lot of us, we believe that storytelling makes a difference, but I think that using that word sometimes for people can feel kind of intimidating. Because when you
Mm.
say to someone, you've got to be a storyteller, like all of a sudden people start thinking in their head that they've got to be like Pixar, like they've got to be able to tell a story and put the video together and do all of these things. And it just seems like, oh man, I can't do any of that stuff. But if we think about like what we do at a cocktail party, I mean, we're telling stories, right? If we think about how we try and teach our kids a lesson, we're telling stories. So, I mean, humans are storytellers. Uh, but when we use the word storytelling in a business context, like a lot of people just get totally overwhelmed and they're like, man, I can't do that. Like, that's not me. I'm not a storyteller. When really we all are. We just need to tap into that again for our marketing. And so one of the big things that I try and tell people, and this is one of the big things I teach, especially when it comes to writing, Because there's a lot of people who are like, oh man, I have to write emails, I have to write stuff on social media, I have to write my about page on my website, and I'm not a writer. And my start, like before I even started in advertising, I was writing plays and screenplays, and that was like a passion of mine. And I'm an English major and a writing geek, and so like I've always been a writer. But when you write a screenplay, every word that you write down is meant to be spoken out loud. You're writing human speech. And a lot of times what happens is when we start writing in a business context, we write for what we think we want to see in a textbook. And so the simplest trick that I tell people is when you write something for marketing, read it out loud. And if it doesn't sound like something you'd say in real life, then change it. Because the closer you can get to what you'd actually say, the more authentic and effective it's going to be.
I love that. I love that tip. It's so important. One thing we see a lot of people do, they'll try to they'll see what people have done and they'll try to copy it and mimic it. And we often tell them, one, that doesn't work because it's not you. You have to bring your authenticity to the table. You have to bring your authenticity to the world, because I personally believe that's the reason you're here on this earth. And that tip is profound. Read it out loud. Does it sound like you're having a conversation? And it's these little kind of needlepoint moves that I want everyone to see. A lot of times, and I used to be like this as well, I thought in order for it to be a significant change, it had to be, from here to here. I guess I can't even see that on the screen, but from here to here, even wider, right? But it's really these needlepoint moves that if we just give it a little adjustment, just like a pilot who's in LA, if he turns that dial 3 degrees, that 3 degrees difference can mean the difference between him landing in New York City or him landing in Washington, D.C., right? So I love that. Read it out loud. See how it sounds. Does it sound like natural language? Does it sound like a conversation? I love that. And I know you have some more great tips to give us as well. I want to ask you about your non-obvious trends. First of all, how did you get started with the non-obvious angle? Because that's just brilliant. I heard it for the first time a couple of weeks ago from you, and I'm like, we got to talk to this guy.
Yeah, that it kind of became a brand for me eventually, so now like non-obvious is really a platform. I mean, we've got all this stuff. We've got these guidebooks, we've got the trend series, we've got a book awards program, a podcast coming in the next couple of months. And to me, like it's all started with being frustrated with the opposite of non-obvious, which is totally obvious. And I just kept reading all of these reports, like especially trend reports, where people were like, the biggest trend for the next year is going to be Facebook. And you're like, that doesn't even, like, Facebook is just something that exists. Like, how is that a trend? It doesn't even make sense. And I just got super frustrated with that, because I said, look, a trend should have direction. Like when you say something is a trend, like it should describe a behavior that people are doing. It shouldn't just be like, hey, this thing exists. Like a trend is drones. Like that's just a thing, and so like it really came out of that frustration. When I started looking at non-obvious, it was funny because, from a branding point of view, I wanted to create a brand around it and trademark it and do all of this stuff. And I did. But when you do all of that work, one of the things you have to look at is like who's using non-obvious, right, as a phrase. And there was only one place where it was really frequently used. And the place where it was frequently used is that in the official definition in the US for a innovation that is good enough to have a patent, so like a patentable idea or a patentable innovation, the description says that it must be non-obvious. So the phrase non-obvious is used in the description of what deserves a patent or what doesn't. And I thought, that's perfect. Like that totally fits with what I'm trying to create with this whole non-obvious platform. And so, I did go out and went through, this is a big small business thing, right? Like you got to get the URL. So like I went out and found the guy who had nonobvious.com and I bought it from him for, way too much money, because I'm like, I need this, like in order to build this brand, like I've got to own nonobvious.com with no dashes. Like I can't do the whole, .co or anything like I can't do that. Right. I need nonobvious.com. So I went out and got that. And then that became kind of one of the pieces of the puzzle. And I added all the other pieces as well. So that was kind of my journey to non-obvious as the brand.
I love that, man. And I hope everybody's listening to how the thought that you put into that. A lot of times we see businesses before they come to either us or before they get some marketing coaching or consulting, they'll have these brands that are attached to, or these URLs that are attached to .biz and .net, those are okay, but you really want the .com, and you really want it to be readable, not the non-obvious.com, the non-obvious.com. Yes, those are going to cost a little more, but it's worth it for the user experience of your end users. And that's really what we're looking at when they're sending you emails, for them to try and remember a dash or remember it's .co, or they see a .co and wonder, is this an error? Do they mean .com and accidentally left off the M? Or you have to try to think about the experience for your users. So I love the thought, the inner thought that you really put into that to get to this brand, which is amazing, which is 10 years strong and looks like it's going even stronger, especially with the Wall Street Journal #1 bestseller.
Yeah, it's been it's all pieces of the puzzle, right? And a lot of times I'll talk to people about a brand and like, what does it take to build a brand, right? And it seems like you need a lot of money to get a brand out there, right? Like that's an assumption a lot of people make. And sometimes I think that the biggest key to building a brand is something that we don't focus enough on, which is consistency. Like using it everywhere, right? And what I mean by that is not just, oh, this brand is on my business card and I have nonobvious.com, but like, in my email signature, it looks a certain way. Everybody who works for me, their email signature, I have dictated like what should there be on their email signature to promote this idea of non-obvious. Like when I do a new, like I just wrote a guest contributed chapter for another book. And the title of my chapter had the word non-obvious in it. Right? Because I'm reinforcing that brand in everything that I'm doing. So that when people think, oh, non-obvious, they know, oh, that's the guy. Like that's the non-obvious guy. And like, to me, that's what we really need to think about. Like, how do we be so consistent with everything we do? Like we've got custom printed yellow non-obvious socks that I wear to speaking events because I have non-obvious socks, right? Like, I mean, so there's so many. And how much does it cost to do a custom printed sock? $12, right? $15 maybe. Yeah, so this is not like me spending thousands of dollars to try and get non-obvious in front of everybody on a billboard. This is me paying attention to the socks and the email signature, which is, not that expensive.
I love that. And that's going along with the non-obvious trend. That's probably one of the non-obvious trends that small business owners can adopt. What are some of the non-obvious low-hanging fruit that we can start to implement that isn't the billboard, which I personally believe aren't too effective unless they're part of a strategy to a holistic strategy. I love, like you said, it's part of a puzzle. We say it's kind of part of a recipe. Anything that you're look at marketing as a recipe. It's going to take, if you're baking a cake, the right amount of flour, the right amount of sugar, depending on how you want the cake to taste. You have to think about all that and all those ingredients in proportion to each other, baked for the right amount of time, baked at the right temperature, cooled for the right amount of time, all these steps. As opposed to just, let me just put a billboard out there or do a TV ad or even do a Facebook ad and just, I think all those businesses.
Well, I think, sometimes you can have a lot of fun with it, right? Like we did a trade show where we did a booth, and one of the big things we wanted to relay was I have a business partner. We do like, keynotes or one-day workshops, right? And it's kind of the whole business, right? And so at this event, we had a lot of global people there, and we wanted to relay that we've done these in like 30 countries around the world because we do a lot of global business. And so we created, just for this conference, something that we called the non-obvious candy collection. And it was candy from like 25 different countries around the world that we gave away along with this little placemat that said, here's the candy and here's the country that it's from. And like, we had people coming to our booth saying, hey, we want to get candy. Cause like, who doesn't want candy? Yeah. And if somebody's coming from like Brazil and they see the candy that they know, or they're coming from Mexico and they see the chili mango, right? Or whatever they're like, whatever they recognize, they're like, oh my God, this is my candy. And now you have this like bonding moment where like you gave them their candy that they maybe remember having when they were a kid back when they lived in Brazil. And it's just a reason for them to engage, right? And that's kind of what it ended up being.
I love that.
And so like sometimes you can just have fun around this idea. I mean, am I going to start a candy company? No. Like, am I going to sell the candy? No. But the non-obvious candy collection like really helped us stand out at that one trade show. Because as anybody knows who's done a booth, like the challenge is you have this booth and then everybody just walks by, right? Like, how do you get them to stop? Give away some crazy candy. Like maybe that'll work, right?
I love that. To me, that it goes with a principle that we encourage a lot in marketing, the non-obvious also kind of disrupting. If it's something that's obvious, the mind, it has so many other things, the subconscious mind especially, it has so many other things it's worried about that it literally deletes everything else that it's not worried about at the time. But if it's something that's non-obvious, if it's something that's disruptive, the mind is going to pay attention to it a little more, like, wait, what's this? This isn't part of the norm. Let me check this out. And non-obvious candy, and you get to the nostalgia of, I mean, you're just combining so many human heart-led principles that really get people to stop. And once you get them to stop, you got their attention, and now you can talk to them about some other things. I love that approach, man.
Yeah.
See, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking. The creativity that it takes. And a lot of marketing isn't really about the social media. It's not about it's about those to a smaller extent than most people give it credit. It's about the creativity. It's about the disruption. It's about the non-obvious trends that Rohit is talking about. So I love that.
Yeah, and sometimes, it takes a little work to try and figure out how to push people towards doing something that they're not used to doing, right? So one of the things we did around the launch of this book, of the Megatrends book, right, is
hey, hold that up a little more so people can see it.
So that's Megatrends. That's non-obvious Megatrends right there.
Wall Street Journal #1 best-selling book last week.
It did really well. Thank you.
Congratulations, sir.
Yes, thank you. One of the things that we did that was really fun is we launched this nationwide scavenger hunt, where we encourage people to sign up in whatever city they happen to be in. And then we did deals with 150 independent bookstores across the country, where we pre-purchased a copy of the book, put it behind the desk under a secret code name. And then we had the scavenger hunt where people would win their city, and then they'd get basically a golden ticket, kind of like a Willy Wonka style golden ticket that they could then take into the bookstore to claim their book. And one of the reasons we did this is because, I also own the publishing company behind it with my wife. So that's our entrepreneurial venture. So beyond the book and the speaking and stuff, I own a publishing company. And so one of the things we wanted to do is we wanted to support independent bookstores, because we believe in having a world where we have bookstores. I don't want bookstores to go under. I love bookstores.
Yeah.
And so by doing this with all these independent bookstores, we were able to drive people into the store, which the bookstores really care about, right? And you wouldn't believe how many people who won a book in one of the independent bookstores said, oh my gosh, I knew this bookstore was there, but I've never been inside until I went and claimed my copy. And now I've been inside, and maybe I'll go back and maybe I'll buy other stuff. And so the bookstores all loved it. The consumers who were part of the scavenger hunt loved it because it was just a fun thing. And by the way, they got a free book. So, who doesn't want that? Yeah. And it ended up being just this really cool thing across the board that we tried as a pilot. And it was just really, really fun. And now we're going to take it and turn it around as a publishing company and say, here's what we did with the independent bookstores. And there's there's kind of a bigger story here, because in May, the biggest trade show in the book industry comes to New York, which is called Book Expo. And so guess what I'm going to be talking about at Book Expo? Yeah. This whole campaign and how we did it and what the results were. And so it gives me something relevant to talk about to this industry too. So there's multiple angles to this, where we're trying something creative, we're doing something new, we're having a bit of fun, and then we're turning it into this really cool story and case study that we can then take back to the industry and say, we do things differently. This is an example of how we do things differently.
That's awesome, man. I love that. And also love the fact, I didn't know that this book was self-published by you guys. So everyone everyone listening and watching, this is quite the accomplishment. It's one thing. It's already a uphill battle, a very challenging to get a Wall Street #1 best-selling book from a major publisher. Let's do it from self-publishing, and that is a huge accomplishment, man. I didn't know that. That's
well, we did. What we did with Idea Press, which is the publishing company, is we created what in the publishing company and industry is called a hybrid publisher. Okay. So instead of just publishing it ourselves and sticking it on Amazon, which is what you can generally do when you self-publish, we have a full-service publishing company with a distribution deal with Ingram, which is the major distributor to all the bookstores. So as a result of that, we can get the book into retail bookstores, airports, as well as online everywhere. So not just Amazon, Target.com, Walmart.com, all of those places. And the reason why we did that is because I just wanted to have that control back. And most of
Yeah.
these publishers, a lot of times they're using distributors anyway. So for us, it was just cut out the middleman, create our own publishing company, and it's been so successful that we've actually done more than 30 other books from other authors as part of the publishing company over the last 4 years that it's been around. So I do my books through there, obviously, because I'm also a customer, but it's kind of become a full independent publishing company, which was not necessarily the intent when we started it, but I mean that's sometimes how a small business goes, right? You create something and there's market value for it and people want it, and then you kind of go from there.
Wow. So I love that. There's a lot of people know about the big publishers. A lot of people know about self-publishing, and you mentioned the kind of the hybrid publishing, which has a lot of the best of both worlds. So I love that. We're going to have to now
Yeah,
that
and just to be fair, I mean we didn't invent this category. There are other publishers that are hybrid publishers, so it's not like we were the only ones, but there's a market there for that.
huge market, huge market. And I think it's one of those non-obvious choices that a lot of people don't know about. A lot of people know about big publishers. A lot of people know about self-publishing. The non-obvious choice might be to consider, hey, what about this hybrid category that not a lot of people know about? So I love that. I love that. We might have to, everyone, I'm going to see if I can twist Rohit's arm to get him to come back and talk about that too, because I know a lot of you have asked about book publishing, best-selling authors, best-selling books, and the product and service lines around the book as well. I know we've had those conversations. The book, there's a lot of things the book can do, credibility, but also what are some of the residual things you can do with the book, the companion things you can do with the book. So yeah, I'm gonna have to twist his arm, see if we can get him to come back. But as you see, he's super busy, so I got to twist his arm a lot more. Awesome sauce. Well, cool beans. So one thing I also want to get into is some of the non-obvious trends that you mentioned about as it related to branding. And one of the seminars that I attended that you did was just knock me off my socks. I'm really critical when I go to seminars because I see so many, and we give our own, so I have a little bias. But I was really just blown away and captivated by yours. And you talked about so many non-obvious trends. Can you give us a few of those non-obvious trends that will be helpful for small business owners as it relates to their marketing, as it relates to their branding, as it relates to their business, any category? I won't box it in. I'll just leave it wide open.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so the book has 10 specific what I call mega trends. And it's based on, like you said, 10 years worth of research. So I started doing this trend report back in 2011, and it started with just a digital report. And for the first 4 years, it was a digital report. Then in the fifth year, I turned it into a full-length book, and that's when the first kind of non-obvious became published as a full book. And then every year since then, I did an annual update of the book. So there was a new version of the book every year. Until finally this Megatrends is the last version. So this is the 10-year anniversary. It's the last time I'm doing it. It's sort of a recap of the past 10 years. It brings everything together into these 10 big ideas that I think are changing our culture and changing the way we think. So that's kind of the context for the book. One megatrend specifically that I think might be interesting for the audience is something that I called instant knowledge. And instant knowledge was the idea that we're really living in a world where we believe we can learn anything just by going online and watching a video or reading an article. And we're used to doing that. And so as a result of that, the companies or individuals who do more to educate us are the ones that occupy our mind space. And to some degree, that's why, if you've ever heard, oh, you should be doing more content marketing, right, is the thing. That's the reason why content marketing is the thing, because when you put content out there, as opposed to just putting ads out there, you're generally educating your customer. Yeah. And if you're educating your customer, you occupy that mind space of being an expert and being of value. And as a result of that, they come to you and say, look, I want your expertise. I want your product. I want what you're selling. Yeah. And that's the way that the progression should work, right? So that's kind of one of the big lenses that I started looking at the world to say, what happens when we start capturing this knowledge much more quickly? And to some degree, like, that was the inspiration that actually led to the creation of this whole guidebook series that I mentioned, right? So, like, this is the other book we talked about, which is the Small Business Guide to Marketing. And this is part of, You can probably see it in the corner there, part of the non-obvious guide series. And so this is meant to be like a whole series that is like the Dummies Guides. And we have 5 of these out on various topics right now from other authors, not just me. So there's one on event planning, one on employee engagement, one on being more creative, one on emotional intelligence. And then we've got more coming on doodling for work and understanding statistics and understanding blockchain. I mean, there's a whole arsenal of these coming out. And part of the reason is because all the Dummies Guides and all the idiots guides, like, the assumption they make is you must be a dummy. You must be an idiot.
Yeah.
And, I don't believe that. So, like, you'll see in the back of this book, like right at the top, it says smart advice for smart people. So it is the opposite of the Dummies Guides in many ways. And then the other sort of description on the front says it's like having coffee with an expert. And so the idea is, like, that's what we want, right? Like, if somebody could sit down with you and pick your brain for an hour, right? That would be hugely helpful for them, right? Yeah. And that's what we want to try and deliver with a book like this, because not everybody's going to get the chance. I mean, your time doesn't scale, right? You can't have an hour-long coffee with everybody to share your expertise. But in a book like this, like, that's what they could get. So that was the inspiration for it. And that's kind of an example of how you take a mega trend and something that's big, that's happening in culture, and turn it into an actual product, turn it into something that is aligned to the trend, where there's this broader context. And so when we launch the guidebook series, it's like there's all of this context around why we think it's going to work. And so we started it.
That's genius, man. Not only the genius, that is, I mean, when I was that was kind of one of my pet peeves against the series you mentioned. I was like, I'm big in the meaning of words. And I'm like, if you buy X, Y, and Z for dummies, you're kind of assuming that, or you're kind of agreeing that, yes, I'm a dummy. Let me get, and I know they mean, hey, we, make it easy and stuff, but I'm just big on words like that.
Yeah, and not only that, but like, if you open one of those guides, I mean, they're written like a dictionary for everything that you might want to know, which is not useful to read if you're trying to learn something, because you can't learn English by reading a dictionary, right? Like, that's just not how we process. And some of the things that they put in there, like, for example, there was a Dummy's Guide to Digital Marketing, I think. And they had 3 pages explaining what the internet was. I mean, seriously, like, do you really need that? Explaining to you that the internet exists for 3 pages? No, you don't, right? So, like, and that's why these Dummies Guides are 400 pages long, right? Because they have 3 pages on what the internet is. And that's why our guides are 200 pages long in small format, because we cut out all that crap.
Yeah, I love that, man. I was and I probably am too stickler on words. Well, no, I wouldn't say too stickler on words. It's a very intentional thing, me being stickler on words. Even at our agency, with our copywriters, with our editors, I'm like, wait a minute, this word presupposes if we use this type of language, and I'm always looking at things from that end. I'm glad to see I'm not the only one, and no, I love.
Definitely not. And I love that. I mean, that's a great, I think that's a great personality trait, because personally, I mean, this is sort of an elevated idea, but like, I believe that the world would be better if people were more intentional about what they said, and they didn't just, post the first thing that came to their mind, and they didn't just do some real-time stupidity on Twitter, like, I believe that if we had more intention with the words that we chose and what we said and what we thought, that the world would be better. And so if we can encourage people to do that, like, that's a good thing.
I love that, man. That really resonates with us. Our here at Social Marquee, our mission is, we're good people helping good people positively impact and authentically connect with massively more and more good people. And that's the premise behind it. If everyone is bringing their authenticity to the world, we make the world a better place. A lot of people are kind of on this gimmicky type of marketing to make a quick buck. And we're like, and that's actually how we started. Well, no more gimmicky marketing. Let's just be real with people. Let's be authentic with people. Let's connect with people. And I love that you're doing that with the non-obvious, call people what they are. You're smart. Here's a smart guide for smart people. It has an underlying presupposition, or it presupposes that this person is an expert in their own right, and we're just going to continue to add on to that. It focuses on what we want to focus on, as opposed to focusing on the success, as opposed to focusing on the deficit, which we just believe is a more effective way of getting whatever progress you're trying to achieve, or achieving whatever goals you're trying to achieve. I don't
Yeah,
know if I
that's right.
said
I
that
mean,
right.
I think that there's a mentality there that we're really
Yeah,
trying to tap
absolutely.
into, which is someone who is self-aware enough to say, "Look, I'm a smart person, but I'm not an expert in that thing."
Exactly.
And so if you're going to pick up the non-obvious guide to small business marketing, like what you're saying is, look, I have a small business, but I'm not a marketing expert, and I don't really want to be. But I do need to know enough about marketing because this is going to grow my business, and that's what I care about. And so, don't give me the marketing 101 that tries to treat me like a college student who has to pass an exam. And
Yeah.
also don't give me the, super elevated, okay, you have tons of money or this is what's going to work if you could do all of this stuff. Like, just give me the tips and tricks. Like, give me the one page template that I can fill out that helps me figure out what to do with marketing, and that's what we tried to write to.
I love that, man. I love that. And as we were talking earlier before we started this interview, the book, that your non-obvious series of the small business marketing, and that kind of sub-series of the non-obvious series has the templates, the guides for people to be able to step by step follow to their success, from wherever they are, from wherever their point A is to their point B. And I love that, because that's a lot of times what people need. I'm not an accounting guy. I have an accountant for that, but for the things that my accountant needs me to do, he has a template that shows, okay, I need X, Y, and Z. And then when you give me X, Y, and Z, I can take this, I need the gas for this car. And once that, I can drive you wherever you need to go. Right. And I love
Yeah.
how you do.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that when you do take that templated approach, you really kind of help people do the one thing that becomes really difficult to do without expertise, which is strategic thinking, as
Yes.
opposed to, oh, I could easily spend $1,000 on Facebook ads, and I can just, and they tell me that I need each ad has to be, whatever 50 characters, and I'll just write 50 characters, and I can slap an image, and I can just do it, right? I mean, that's very, step one, step two, step three, done.
Right.
But strategically, like, what should that ad talk about? Like, what should it point to? Do you even have a landing page? Like, and should you even be doing that ad in the first place, right? Like, those are the strategy questions, and that tends to be the biggest thing that people struggle with, which is like, what should I even be doing in the first place? And so that's what I tried to put together in this guide, which is like, if I was helping you figure out your strategy for what to do, what would I ask you? And what would you need to know in order to do that well? And then what sort of format could I put into a book like this to help you ask yourself those questions instead of having to do it with me or with someone else, which you may or may not have the chance to do.
I love that. I love that. And you said something at the beginning of that I'd love for you to repeat about the strategy. And it was so good. I want to actually use it for our own as well. Can you repeat that? Well, how you said the strategy, that kind of sound bite. That's the word I'm looking for. That sound bite you said about strategy.
Yeah, I don't really remember what I said, but probably
Yeah.
it was
I'll say something that is
something
like,
like,
wait,
it's really, yeah, it's really, I mean, it's easy to go off and do the tactics, but the strategy, the reason why strategy matters is it helps you figure out what not to do,
mm,
as much as it helps you figure out what to do. And, and that's pretty good. Like, that's pretty important. And we often forget about that because, the platforms and how self-service they have become in terms of, yeah, I can do Google keyword ads myself, I can do Facebook ads myself, I can do ads on all these things. Like, they lead you towards the tactic. They're like, hey, here's the audience segmentation, like, which audience do you want? Just pick one. And when you look at a shelf, I mean, it's like looking at a shelf of pasta sauce, right? You're like,
yeah.
oh, well, these are my options. Like, and what nobody seems to be asking is like, do I even want pasta in the first place, right? Because if you're standing in front of that shelf, like, you're gonna pick up a sauce and you're gonna go, and it's either gonna be good or not. But maybe you didn't ask the right question in the first place, right?
I love that. I love that. And I love that analogy. We're huge on analogies and metaphors here as well. So I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah.
What would you say then is, so you've had immense success and you're obviously an expert at strategy and obviously an expert at non-obvious trends, marketing, small business as well. What is something that you found that in your strategies that have shown you what are some things not to do that probably most people think you should be doing? What are some of those non-obvious things that we shouldn't do as small business owners?
Well, I mean, the first thing that actually I even start the non-obvious guide to small business marketing with this topic. I believe that the worst way to create a marketing strategy is by setting a budget.
Yes.
Which is often the first thing that people do. And when you start in that way, then your new question becomes, where do I spend this money? And it's like you just won a bunch of money in Vegas and you're like, okay, now I got to spend it on something. Yeah. I don't know what, And so you start to treat your advertising like a shopping spree. And
I love it.
And that's not a good way to go, because you don't ask the right questions if that's the mentality. And really, the other thing that we fail to recognize is if you're doing marketing and advertising that is tracking conversion, right? And if you can demonstrate a business impact to the marketing that you're doing in terms of revenue, your marketing budget is unlimited. Because if you think about it, if you're spending $1,000 to make $5,000 and you can track that, you just made $5,000, take another $1,000 from that, respend it, make another $5,000 and keep reinvesting, right? So, this idea that, I only have X amount as a marketing budget is kind of wrong. If you're able to track it to something that's generating business for you. So that is a big perception shift. If I said to any small business owner, your marketing budget is unlimited, they'd be like, what do you mean unlimited? I'm looking at my bank account. It's not unlimited. But when you track it to something that's really working, you can keep spending on that as long as it keeps working. Now, at some point, there's kind of a diminishing return, right? Like you've already saturated or whatever. So it doesn't go like in a straight line forever. Yeah. But to some degree, the more you're investing in the things that are working, the more your business is going to grow and the more you can keep investing. And so taking that budget question off the table and instead saying, what is going to work is a much better place to start, which is what is going to stand out? What's going to help me drive that thing for my business that's going to lead to more customers, more sales, more attention, whatever the upside is. Like that's what you want to focus on. And, the other thing that I think that people get confused about is the difference between marketing and sales.
Yes.
And so like, just to use, you're big on analogies. I'm big on analogies too, right? Like imagine you have an auto dealership, right? The difference between marketing and sales is the job of marketing is to get people to walk in the door of the dealership. The job of sales is to close the deal after they walk in the door. So your job of marketing is not to get people to buy the car, right? Because that takes more. That takes people walking in, testing the car door and the sound that it makes, knowing what the financing is, in that market in particular, right?
Absolutely.
So your marketing isn't going to sell directly in that case. Your marketing should be all about, hey, come on into the dealership. Like we got all these different offers. We got these brand new cars. You want to check it out. Come for a test drive. Take it out. Those are all the things that you want to try and drive with the marketing, because at that point you can do sales conversion, right? And as soon as we flip that switch, now we start recognizing what we should be tracking to see if our marketing is working instead, right? So you couldn't in that industry say, well, I'm doing all this marketing and all these people are coming in the dealership and they're not buying the car, so my marketing's not working. Well, that's wrong. Your marketing is working. Your sales isn't working. So, or vice versa. Like we convert all of the people who come in, but nobody's coming in. Well, then your marketing's not working and your sales is working, right? So that's the sort of thing that we need to start thinking about, like what is actually working and what isn't working. And we just have to get a little smarter about that.
I love that. And I'm glad you broke down that distinction, because a lot of people do synonymize it. And a lot of businesses even have, hey, this is our marketing and sales department. And a lot of people just kind of subconsciously synonymize the two. And the two are very, very, very separate. They have separate roles. They have separate optimization tactics. They have separate optimization strategies that oftentimes compete with each other. And so it's like, how do we, and that's going to take strategy to see how can these two things with different priorities actually work together like a symphony. You know, symphonies have different various instruments that could compete with each other if it weren't for the right score, if it weren't for that composer to actually meld those potentially conflicting sounds together to be collaborative sounds together. I like that metaphor. I might use that again.
Yeah, that's good. Well, and I think the other thing, I mean, they are separate. The thing that makes it more challenging in small business is you might have one person in charge of both.
Absolutely.
Or you may only have one person in charge of one and nobody in charge of the other one, right? You may just have a salesperson and no marketing person. And so, they are separate. But thinking about how they work together, to your point, like the symphony, may require that you bring someone else in to handle one of them, right? Or at least give you advice on how to do one of the other ones, right? Because then you can have these pieces of the puzzle working together. What doesn't work is taking somebody who's a great salesperson and saying, okay, now you have to do marketing too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
because not everybody's got the right skill set to be able to do the other one versus the one that you got them to do in the first place.
Absolutely. I love that mindset shift, and we're huge on mindset shifts here. Just what are some of those, like we said earlier, those needlepoint moves that get you to a slightly different perspective, and in the long run, even in the short term, and especially in the long run, just has so much vast, a different outcome, a different perspective, and how it just morphs into a different manifestation of what you would have done, initially without that kind of mindset shift, that needlepoint mindset shift. I love that. Absolutely love that. I'm also real curious since you've had so much success and your success is still growing and it's still growing exponentially. First of all, congratulations on that. And second of all, if you could, in your current state, go back to Rohit 10 years ago, 20 years ago, what would Rohit now tell 10 years younger, 20 years younger Rohit then?
I think one of the biggest things is I would have started earlier with building my direct audience. So what I mean by that is I'm really intentional now about growing my email list, for example, of all of these people who are hearing from me on a weekly basis. And every Thursday I put out an email with just the most interesting stories of the week, like stories that you haven't heard, unusual, non-obvious stories. And my intent with that is to give people a little bit of a broader perspective of the non-obvious, and also just to help them be more interesting as people, right? I mean, if you read interesting stories of like the guy who managed to hack, like this past week, I wrote about the guy who managed to hack Google Maps into thinking that there was a traffic jam by borrowing 100 cell phones, putting them in a little red wheelbarrow and walking slowly down the street. And Google was reading the location data from all of those phones and thinking there were 100 cars on this empty road, and it appeared red on Google Maps, right?
Wow.
And so he did this whole social commentary on, like, we just blindly believe based on Google Maps that road must be crowded when actually it's a dude with a red wheelbarrow just walking down the street, right?
That's hilarious.
That's a fascinating story to me.
Yeah.
It's interesting, right? And so like every week I do that, and that email, like, I'm really intentional about getting people on that list because A, I'm giving them something of value every week for free. B, they hear from me every week and start to build a relationship, even though we haven't met yet. So that eventually, after a year, 2 years, 3 years, when I finally say, hey, I've got this book that I'm launching and, can you please support it? Can you please go out and help kind of talk about it, read it? Anything you're willing to do would just be great. I would really appreciate it, right? I'm not incentivizing them, hey, get this for free, get that for free. I'm just saying, look, would you help? And after people have been getting this from me constantly, they're like, yeah, you've given me so much value. And with this email that you spend hours doing every week, and I just find interesting stories, like, yeah, sure, I'll show up and I'll help you. And that's kind of the way that it works, right? You give and you give and you give, and you add value for people. And when it comes time for them to help you out, or think of someone who could help them that does what you do, like, you're top of mind.
Wow. I love that, man. Start earlier. We get so many people to say, hey, we're not ready for X, Y, and Z yet. We're not. And we tell people, start now. Start now. I forget who said it. I don't know if it was not Bill Gates or Steve Jobs. Someone famous said it. If you're not embarrassed of your first implementation or your first version, you waited too long to launch.
Yeah.
I love that because,
Yeah.
as we look back on even our first summits and especially our first marketing campaigns 12 years ago, I would look at those and just screech, right? But without that start, and of course you're going to get better over time, but without that start, we'll always be, because there's always something we can do better. There's always another level. And it's really more of the subconscious mind just trying to keep us safe and keep us in our comfort zone. But stretch, start now. It won't be perfect now. Great. Be perfect in your imperfections. And all you have to do to do that is just start. So I love that. Start now.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
I love that a lot. It's the same thing with something you said earlier about asking the right questions. One of my mentors and colleagues, he's actually on this summit, Sean Smith. You guys will see his session on here as well. He says, you ask a better question, you get a better answer. And I love how you start your book with that better question, with those better questions that we normally ask all the time because that's what we hear everybody asking. What's your budget? You go to the car dealership, what's your budget? You go to most digital marketing agencies, what's your budget? I'm glad that we as an agency don't fall into that category of we don't ask what's your budget up front either. We ask, what's your goal? Where are you looking to go? And we assess where you currently are. That way, once we assess where you currently are and where you're looking to go, we can now, kind of like that Google Maps, draw you several paths in between from your point A to point B based on whatever constraints we have at the time. Right. So I love.
That's a much stronger way to go for sure.
You heard it here. We're endorsed by Rohit. No, but we appreciate that, man. And it's something that we found, and one thing that we all our speakers on this summit, you'll find that all of them are experts in their region, experts in their industry, international experts, and every last one of them, you'll see that they're combining their expertise with humanity, just like we are with Rohit right now. We can talk to them like, we're on the couch. We're on different couches across the country, but it's about that connection that we need to build with our audiences, about that connection that we need to build with our end users. It's not so much about promoting our products to them, not promoting our services to them. It's about building that bigger connection, building that stronger, more authentic connection. That's really how you can compete with the big boys who have millions of dollars to spend every hour. That's how you compete, just building this connection. So I love that, man.
Yeah, it
I
is
love that.
for sure.
Awesome sauce. Well, cool beans. So I want to ask you, is there anything? Well, first of all, I know people have questions. I know people want to get the guides. I know people want to get on your email list. How can people best reach you? How can they best keep in contact with you and crave this great content that you have?
The easiest way is just definitely sign up for the list. So it's just nonobvious.com/subscribe.
Okay.
And that's super easy. You'll be right on the list. Every Thursday, you'll get an email from me with new stories. A lot of times I'll also put like special bonuses and things in there. Like I had a bonus excerpt download of a chapter of a book I just contributed to. Sometimes I'll put like new templates, new guides. A lot of times I'll talk about like where I'm appearing. So I might be coming to your city to do an event or something like that. And so you can come and we can meet in person. So all of that stuff kind of comes from that list. I'm very, very big on email because it's the traditional marketing model is like paid, owned, earned, right? So like you have paid media, which is like advertising. You have owned media, which is like your website that you own. And then there's earned, which is like you get somebody to write about you, like PR basically, right? Like somebody writes an article. But then there's this other category, which more people are starting to talk about, called rented, which is like your Facebook page, which you don't own. Like you're renting that space from Facebook, but they own it, right? Your LinkedIn group or your Twitter account. And the challenge is like increasingly, in order to access your audience, you're going to have to pay. So like if you have 500 people who are fans of your Facebook page, they're not going to see anything unless you start paying Facebook advertising money for them to see it. Whereas if you had an email list, you don't have to pay anyone to access your own email list. I mean, yeah, there's email providers and stuff that you probably have to pay, but you own it. And so the real question, I think, when it comes to all of these audiences is how can you own more of your relationships instead of renting it or having it be somewhere else where you have to pay for it in order to access it, right?
I love that. I love that shift. That's another major mindset shift. How can you own your audience as opposed to renting them? That's huge. That is really huge because a lot of people don't realize Facebook likes and follows on your page, or Facebook likes and follow on your personal page, business page, Instagram, etc., they're technically rented.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that analogy. I just, as you were saying that, I'm going to write it down later. As it relates to media, an analogy of rope. It can be either rented, owned, paid, or earned. So I'm
Yeah.
going to be,
Yeah.
yeah, we gotta collab.
There are some charts out there about that. I think. I mean, I haven't invented the paid, owned, earned model, but the rented is new. Not that many people are talking about this rented category, but it's totally true. And the thing is, you might say, well, I don't pay to have a Facebook page, right? So it's not like rented in the sense that I'm paying for it, but actually you will, because what is happening now is anything you post in those pages gets totally buried because of Facebook's algorithms, unless you pay to have it come to the top.
Exactly.
So now what you're paying for is the idea that anybody's going to see it, because otherwise the speed of everything going means like you'll get 0 views on something, or like, relatively small views. And then all of a sudden when you pay for it, now all of a sudden you have hundreds, right? Magically.
Magically. Right.
Yeah. And that's the revenue model, right? I mean, you think about Facebook, like we don't pay to be consumers on Facebook, and you don't pay as a business to have a Facebook page generally. So you're the product, right? Like you're what they're selling to their advertisers, and now you're gonna have to pay for that.
I love that. We just so we make a point to be as top of mind and as updated as possible here at the agency. And in one report from 2019 on Instagram's advertising revenue. So Instagram's only revenue model is through advertising. Facebook bought them back in, I think, 2012 for $1 billion with a B dollars. In 2019, Instagram made 20 billion with a B dollars in revenue, almost a fourth of Facebook's total income for the year, just off of that kind of rented model that you mentioned there. I mean, that's, and when we think about it, we think, yeah, it doesn't cost us, or I'm not paying rent. You technically are, when you subscribe to someone or you click on an ad, that's still kind of you're paying rent. It's just you paying with time and energy as opposed to necessarily money. So a lot of times,
and either you're paying for that directly, or you are being monetized.
Absolutely.
So that they're making money in other ways, right? And that's just the business model, right? That's how it works.
Yeah. Wow, man. I tell you, didn't I tell you were in for a treat with Rohit today? And this is just the tip of the tip of the tip of the tip of the iceberg. So I know that we have a lot more content that we can give, and I'm hoping to twist Rohit's arm that he'll be able to join us on another summit as well, because so I'm going to twist his arm after we get off the call today. Just in wrapping up, Rohit, is there anything you want to leave the audience with? Anything, words of encouragement, advice, wide open.
Yeah, I mean, I think I really believe, and I've seen this over and over again, that it doesn't take a super special talent to be able to leverage some of these ideas. You don't have to be the most innovative person. You don't have to be the most creative person. What you do have to be is willing to try some of these new techniques and be curious about them. And that's really who I write books for. I write books for people who have that curiosity, who want those new ideas, who never believe that they are done learning. And that's, you talked a lot about mindsets, right? Like that is the mindset that I think benefits all of us to have. And if there's any big idea behind Non-Obvious as a brand, it is to encourage people to see the unusual and to be non-obvious themselves in terms of what they consume. It's really easy today to just consume the stuff that you agree with and not venture out beyond that and assume that anyone who doesn't think like you must be an idiot. And I think that that the wise people, the ones who are going to succeed in the future, are not the ones who do that. They're the ones who venture out, who say, look, somebody could think something different, and I'm going to change my point of view and change my perspective, because I'm not going to be that person who's just super narrow-minded and only thinks in one way. And I want more people like that in the world. I want to live in a world with more people like that. So I think that's really what the non-obvious brand and everything that I'm trying to do is about. It's see the unusual, be more open-minded, be more interesting, and I think that makes you more successful too.
I love that. Love that, man. And you've heard it here, folks. Non-obvious man himself, Mr. Rohit. #1 best-selling author, #1 Wall Street Journal best-selling author of the new book, Non-Obvious Mega Trends. And please subscribe to his list at nonobvious.com/subscribe. That's nonobvious.com/subscribe. Make sure you sign up there, totally free. And every Thursday, he's going to give you some great, more non-obvious trends, non-obvious tips. So another great way to keep in touch with Rohit. Wow, another great session, another great Small Biz Better session. You'll get the info for the next session. It should already be in your email box, so you'll just access that information the same way you access this information here. And we are just looking forward to continuing to give you a lot more advice, a lot more expertise. If you have questions for Rohit or questions in general, make sure you leave them right below this video. We will collect as many of those as possible and try to get them addressed at another summit. And with that, speaking of another summit, I'm actually going to ask him here on air so it can twist his arm even more if he'll join us for another summit.
Yeah, sure, man. Let's schedule it.
Awesome. I love it. Which is an accomplishment because Rohit is extremely busy. As I mentioned, he's on tour right now. Like in a couple of days, he's going to, I forget where his calendar said, he's got Cincinnati and some other places on the calendar. So this is awesome. Thank you so much, man, for joining us. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your expertise. We appreciate your passion of sharing your passion with us. This has been amazing.
You're welcome.
And so with that, everyone, we thank you again for joining us. Again, access the next session in your access to that is in your emails. We look forward to seeing you at the next session. Small Biz Better. Continue to let us know how we can best serve you and how we can continue to bring you more great experts like Rohit. So until the next session, we'll see you later.